What happens when you get a bunch of advanced supercars worth millions of dollars on a short track with retired racing championship winners? You get Fastmasters, a racing series that in its short run gained a reputation for crashing and totaling supercars. It even gave them the nickname Crashmasters because of its reputation. So whose idea was it to make this series? Well, it was Terry Linger, a producer at ESPN, and he had the bright idea perfect for TV, a racing series with retired racing legends, similar to other sports like golf's Legends Tour. This was nothing new in the racing scene, because there were races like IROC, but IROC made sense. They had equally prepared stock cars on oval tracks that were big enough to show the driver's skill. Linger's idea was to use midget cars, which would have made much more sense since it would be racing on a 5/8 lap or a small track. But something that sensible wouldn't have made good TV. So why not supercars? According to ESPN, they were going to use the Concierge GTP, a first choice for ESPN. The GTP was a failed and kind of ugly looking supercar today, but don't be fooled by this car's looks. It was pretty advanced. It used a composite monocoque chassis, along with being pretty quick. Unfortunately, the deal between ESPN fell through, so Linger still needed a supercar, and he was about to find a brand that had one and had no idea what to use it for. Jaguar at this time was pulling out of IMSA racing, and all racing in North America, but its team, Tom Walkinshaw Racing, still had 1 year left on its contract to race in the United States. So the Jaguar team was using the XJR-14, but Jaguar were sick of IMSA racing. They wanted to be the star of the show. Around the same time, Jaguar came out with the XJ220, a supercar with sleek looks paired with a twin-turbo V6 engine co-developed under TWR, making the XJ220 the fastest car in the world, reaching speeds of 212 miles an hour. If the 220 had its own racing series, it would be in front of every retiree with enough money to dish out to afford one of these supercars. ESPN and Jaguar came to agreements, and Jaguar would give 12 XJ220s to battle in the Indianapolis Raceway. In exchange, Jaguar would get their cars on prime TV exposure for 6 nights. You have to remember that only about 280 XJ's 220s were made. So, when the 12 were given away, that was about 4% of all of the 220s ever made, sentenced to death by short track. On the topic of track, you're probably wondering why such a small track was chosen. ESPN chose the Indianapolis Raceway Park, not to be confused with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The IRP was much smaller, and the reason for using this track was that ESPN was already using it to broadcast midget and sprint car racing. They need much smaller tracks, so all the cameras were already put in place. So racing at IRP was cheapest and easiest for ESPN, at least on paper. Now that it had been decided that the race would be on a short track, the Jags would have to be made into short track racers by TWR. TWR had a ton of experience with Jaguars, helping them create the XJ220 in the first place, and win big in Europe. But even though TWR could help Jaguar win at Le Mans, it didn't mean that they could have any experience with oval racing. With Jaguar already millions into this event, they had next to no budget remaining. Because of this minuscule budget, the TWR team could not do any of the modifications to make the car much better on an oval, like spring rates, wedges, and adjusted camber. And they didn't even have enough money for racing slicks. They just overinflated the stock tires that came on the Jaguar. And even the safety modifications were lacking. Sure, they had racing seats and harnesses, but no car had a rolled cage because of the budget. And another reason to convince you that the 220 was a bad choice was the stock slip differential that they used was prone to unlocking, leaving it very common for drivers to lose control of their cars. After the first car was put together, expert driver Johnny Rutherford was designated to test the car. On his first test run, Rutherford crashed the car, leaving to fix the car and prep the other 11 cars. But with all the extra work that they did, it was time for the first season of Fastmasters to start. For the first event, the plan was to have 10 drivers do 10 laps around an oval, then 10 laps around a roval, and finally a race with 6 laps around each. But when the first race happened, there were only 9 drivers because one of the Jaguars had already crashed trying to qualify. You would think this would be a good wake-up call to all the other drivers to be more conservative when driving. But when the green flag dropped, the drivers didn't seem to calm down. By the second lap, chaos had already broken out, when Jim Math went 3 wide and proceeded to lose control and bumped Dick Trickle, well, destroying victory lane in the crash. And on the following lap, Troy Ruttman also crashed his XJ. After more crashes, the race ended after only the second heat, not having the final race, seeing what was likely to unfold if they continued racing. Probably looking at the task set in front of them, apparently every TWR mechanic threatened to leave, seeing how many cars they would have to repair. And even Tom Walkinshaw asked Ligner to stop the racing series. But the teams worked hard to fix the cars and treat the body damage. But even with the repairs, 2 of the cars were deemed totaled after just the first race. So the second race would have 2 less cars. After fuel rule changes, they changed, like dropping the oval track, there were less accidents. That was until the final night. For the final event, there was a $100K grand prize. To win this grand prize, there would be 2 heat races with the top 3 drivers from each advancing to the final, a 12-lap race. For the final, there was tons of close racing and much chaos and carnage, just as much as the first event. After many crashes and 2 cars retiring, it was Bobby Unser who crossed the line and finished taking home the 100 grand prize, being the first, only, and last Fastmasters champion. When looking at Fastmasters, it's pretty obvious why there are no more seasons of the Demolition Derby disguised as a racing series. But what it did create is something that has never happened before and probably will never happen again. Even though some people may call it sacrilege to destroy some of the most advanced race cars of the time, it put a bigger smile on so many people's faces than just seeing the car at the museum. And at the end of the day, isn't that what racing's all about? Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you're here, you clearly enjoyed the video, so leave a like and subscribe and check out my other content that's on the screen now.